Hello, it's Marty Braden again, and our topic today is From Trailing Clouds of Glory Do We Come? Such an interesting topic, but before I jump right into it, I'd like to take a moment and explain to those of you who are watching one of my videos for the very first time the why behind my videos. I think it'll help you understand them and why I'm doing them. I also should mention I got a little cold sore. I'm not self-conscious about it. I just wanted you to know I'm well aware of it. And if you're wondering what's up, that's the cold sore. It's the downside of my cold, but I can't keep away from doing these videos. So I just want you to know that I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so you may also know the church by the pejorative slangism, Mormonism, or Mormons. I, of course, prefer to be called Latter-day Saint. Anyway, I get all of my topics for my videos from a book I recently wrote and published titled An Atheist Delusion. It's my Latter-day Saint perspective on atheist Richard Dawkins' anti-theist, anti-Christ book that he titled The God Delusion. As you probably know, Richard is world-renowned and part of the New Atheist group. Richard says atheism is simply an absence of belief in God. I see that Richard and most every other atheist that I know of simply has a lack of faith in God's existence. Most of them have faith in their own worldview, however, and it's usually being naturalism, which is a belief in such theories as the quasi-doctrine of evolution, with its chief tenet being natural selection. I recently watched a movie about Charles Darwin titled Creation, and it implied that his theory of evolution was born out of the loss of his faith in God, and that moved him to finish his book, The Origin of Species. Right at the beginning of Richard's book, Richard wrote in the introduction to his book saying this: the purpose for writing The God Delusion was to make atheists out of every one of us. Once I published my book, I decided to set up my channel and called it An Atheist Delusion, but you can find it by searching for Martin Braden-author. My channel has allowed me to record and post short videos of me reviewing every single one of Richard's anti-theist and anti-Christ arguments that he put forth in his book. And so far I've posted 121 videos covering those arguments. The newest video you're watching right now is part 122. And so with that said, I'm going to pick it up where I left off last time, which was the second subtitle of chapter 10, the last chapter of the book, and it's titled Inspiration. So let's go ahead and jump right there. First of all, since the title of this subtitle is Inspiration, you would think Richard would have used that word while making his points about it, but I have reviewed his comments several times, and I could not find where he even refers to the word inspiration throughout this subtitle. So I'm just going to respond to what he did say about it. Inspiration, he said, is the fourth role that religion plays in a theist's life. Richard begins his subtitle by saying this is a matter of private judgments. And so the method of argument he had to employ against what religious people say the role that inspiration plays, though he didn't use the word inspiration, like I said, in the lives of human beings is going to be rhetoric rather than logic. And that's because the process of being mentally stimulated to do or feel something, especially something creative, is simply a matter of private judgment and personal taste. That's his definition of inspiration, I guess. Richard's rhetoric begins with his atheistic view that life is simply luck, or the result of mere chance bringing us into existence. In other words, the fact that we're each alive and experiencing life is simply the luck or chance of the draw. I have not read it, but Richard mentions another book he had written, and he titled it Unweaving the Rainbow, in which he gives the following quote: I tried to convey how lucky we are to be alive, he said, given that the vast majority of people who could potentially be thrown up by the combinatorial lottery of DNA will in fact never be born, end quote. As an atheist, Richard's brain doesn't seem to permit his mind to imagine the idea of an existence or a life before this life, nor imagine the idea of an existence after our mortal life ends. My belief is that there is most definitely a God who is the father of billions of spirit children, all of whom are meant to come to this earth to experience what all of us are experiencing, our pilgrim's progress, so to speak, which is called mortality. For Richard, this life of mortality, and only this life, is all there is to it. And so at death, it's over and done with. In other words, lights out, period. We were nothing before we came into existence, and at death we, our individual selves, will return to the nothingness that was before, or I should say will return to dust. To Richard, we're not spirit persons, we're just dirt. Richard says this atheist view is correspondingly life-affirming and life-enhancing, while at the same time never being tainted with self-delusion, wistful thinking, or the lingering self-pity of those who feel that life owes them something. I have to admit that I had to look up lingering. It means to complain or protest, especially in an annoying and persistent manner. In other words, do you serve wine with your cheese? Many atheists have said that the knowledge that we have only one life should make this life all the more precious. I particularly enjoyed Richard's analogy where he tries to show that it's pure luck that any of us are alive at all. Here's what he said. For those of us lucky enough to be here, is lucky another name for natural selection, Richard? I'm sorry. I pictured the relative brevity of life by imagining a laser-thin spotlight creeping along a gigantic ruler of time, Richard says. He continues, everything before or after the spotlight is shrouded in the darkness of the dead past or the darkness of the unknown future. We are staggeringly lucky to find ourselves in the spotlight at all. However brief our time in the sun, in the spotlight, is if we waste a second of it or complain that it is dull or barren or, like a teen might say, boring, couldn't this be seen as a callous insult to those unborn trillions who will never even be offered life in the first place? End quote. Trillions who will never be born? Really, Richard? Trillions who will never be born? Man, oh man, the way an atheist mind works is so fascinating to me. Implied in what Richard calls rhetoric, where he says he imagines trillions of unborn, non-existent people being insulted if you or I waste our lives while we're living here on earth, is the imaginative thought that these so-called unborn, non-existent people would actually be thinking and feeling something at all. They haven't gone through evolution yet, right? Isn't that? I'm sorry. Let alone feel that we're insulting them. Wow. In other words, these non-existent potential beings, have non-existent minds that have non-existent feelings of consciousness and not being able to have a possible life experience of their own. How would a nothing even have a thought, let alone a thought like this one? Didn't Richard just say that he believes that there was nothing before his life on earth and that there is nothing after it or after he dies? Richard believes that his individual self, didn't come from any other place, that there was no he before his life here on earth. And so when his individual self dies, his body of flesh and bones, he doesn't go anywhere after death except into the ground where his body, his he, will just rot away into dust. He, whatever he is right now, a large cluster of cells, Richard, simply goes back to being the dust his cells came from, meaning he'll become nothing once again, just like he was nothing before his life here on earth. Good honk in the morning, Richard. What a poverty-stricken belief and view of one's life and value and lack of purpose. It's so sad to me. No wonder atheist dictators place little to no value on life and human life except for the work unit they represent for their narcissistic utopian goals. If Richard's view of life is true, then why does it matter at all whether we make the most of it or don't? Atheists believe that this life is all there is. In other words, our minutes, our hours, our days, our years, or whatever length of life or time we have on this earth, and the contribution we may or may not have made to the world around us, that's all there is, period. Nothing more, nothing less. Excuse me. And once it's over, your personal length of time on earth, once it's over, this view or belief reminds me of a song by the indomitable American iconic singer Peggy Lee, who sang, "Is that all there is?" Quote, "I know what you must be saying to yourselves. If that's the way she feels about it, why doesn't she just end it all? Oh, no, not me. I'm not ready for that final disappointment, because I know just as well as I'm standing here talking to you that when that final moment comes and I'm breathing my last breath, I'll be saying to myself, is that all there is? Is that all there is? If that's all there is, my friends, then let's keep dancing." Know that song? Let's break out the booze and have a ball, if that's all there is. This "that's all there is" mindset also reminds me of a verses of scripture in the Book of Mormon that says in 2 Nephi 28 verses 7 through 9, "Yea, and there shall be many which shall say, Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, and it shall be well with us. And there shall also be many which shall say, Eat, drink, and be merry, nevertheless, fear God, He will justify in committing a little sin, yea, a little lie, take the advantage of one because of his words, dig a pit for thy neighbor. There is no harm in this, and do all these things, for tomorrow we die. And if it so be that we are guilty, God will beat us with a few stripes, and at last we shall be saved in the kingdom of God. Yea, and there shall be many which shall teach after this manner, false and vain and foolish doctrines, and shall be puffed up in their hearts, and shall seek deep to hide their counsels from the Lord, and their works shall be in the dark. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. To atheists like Richard, life is like a memory we have from looking at a photo in a photo album of a loved one. How do we know that the picture of that young woman with her baby in her arms glued in a photo album isn't just a made-up, imaginary, photoshopped, artificial, intelligently, digitally faked photo unless we were there, experiencing this event shown in the picture of her and her baby in person? Who cares anyway? Once she's dead, and nothing matters about that dead person and her baby anymore, right? There's no reason to feel happy or sad or feel nostalgic or despairing while we're here. Life is just a false breeze that stirs up a pile of fallen leaves and then passes on, and the leaves soon settle down as though there was never a blast of wind in the first place. Tell me, who remembers it? Or why would it even be remembered if tomorrow we die and that's all there is to it? I know what Richard would say. He'd say that the feelings that our mind, our wet brains, produces, the love we feel for others, our passions, our accomplishments, our mistakes, and any and every thought we've ever had, can stir us to greatness or spiral us down to the very depths of baseness, because that's just being human. But the question remains, if there isn't anything before this life and there's nothing after it, then why do we have any of these emotions or feelings in the first place? That's my question. What purpose did evolution's natural selection see in us having our brief moment in the spotlight, where we experienced memories and emotions and passions just so that they can fade away and be forgotten? Did natural selection malfunction? Were our memories just to remind us of dangers? Are they a driving force of evolution and not the force behind our need to keep our memories of others so we don't forget them? Why do we have memories of ourselves and others when they're just going to disappear once we're dead? The only ones with our memories of making the best of our lives once we're dead are those who continue to live after we die. What's the point of memories, Richard? Are they just to protect and keep us safe from past dangers and that's it? Come on, man, that doesn't ring true to me at all, because death is inevitable, and when it's all over, there's no reason for memories, right? Yes, we can choose what we want to make of our lives and what we want to make our lives mean. Considering Richard's atheistic view, I suggest that this choice of what we want to make of our life mean and what we want it to mean is not the question we should be asking ourselves. The question we should be asking ourselves, if Richard and all the atheists are right about life, is why? Why should we even have the thought that we make the best of our lives while we're alive? Because at death it dissolves away and becomes meaningless vapors of nothingness anyway. If what Richard and every other atheist believes about life is true, then where in heaven's name do all the feelings of nostalgia for one's family come from? And why do they even come to us in the first place? How do they lend to our survival? Where does the feeling or desire to make this one life the very best life it can be come from? And if our lives aren't or weren't the best they could have been, then what does it matter? Tell me, why is there this feeling in all of mankind that says life is precious? And why is our familial feelings towards family ubiquitous? Why do I want to know who I am and who my ancestors were and where they were from and what did they do with their lives if I don't have this knowledge about my ancestors already? All the movies and shows that show people searching out their ancestors, and they fall into tears and amazement when they learn of their ancestors. Why do we have such feelings and longings to know such things? Today's atheist Chinese leader Xi Jinping, as well as every past and present despot who has ever lived, I submit to you, views the lives of their own children as precious, and so what or who is telling each of us that it is too? William Wordsworth, an American poet, wrote the following verity, quote, "Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar, not in entire forgiveness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come, from God, who is our home. If evolution is all about survival and tossing out that which doesn't prove or provide a means for us to survive, then I ask you, survive what? Survive death? Survive sickness? Is it to protect us from dying, when dying is simply the end of a random, meaningless self-life where we end up as a dirt pile again, being nothing forevermore? If we're honest with ourselves, I would say that this is built-in drive to survive. This built-in drive to survive is another divine character trait we got from our heavenly parents. All parents know that life is precious, especially their own little ones. The fact is, we can't stop death from ravaging us. That said, our lives have a purpose, and it's not just to survive until we die. Our purpose is threefold. First, it is to gain the physical bodies we each have gained. Second is to experience the good with the bad that life on earth brings. Each experience providing the opportunity for us to choose whether or not we believe in God and His principles of truth, and whether or not we want to keep His commandments so we can live a happy life here and after we die. And the third purpose is to experience the process of becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ or not. If we choose to exercise faith in Him and in His atoning sacrifice, it offers each of us two special gifts. The first gift that comes to us without any conditions is the gift of immortality. Every last one of us are going to be resurrected and live forever, whether we live good or evil lives. Our bodies of flesh and bone will reunite with our spirits perfectly and together in glory, never to be separated again. That's immortality. The second gift is conditional. It is the gift of eternal life in the presence of heavenly society of Jesus Christ and our Heavenly Father. But it's based on the conditions of repentance and our willingness to be obedient to God's commandments. This greatest of all gifts of God provides us the possibility of living forever with and in our family unit. This gift requires that we do our best to obey the laws and ordinances of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and then endure to the end of our lives here on earth. As I said, this earth life is a preparatory state so that we can prepare to meet our God. Richard's analogy is like me saying, you didn't have any knowledge that you need to have a happy, successful life before college, because there is no before college experience or life before college. And so you need to make your college life as meaningful as you possibly can, because at the end of your 4, 8, or 10 years of intense study, your knowledge and experience gained from your college life here on Earth's campus will be over and useful for nothing, because that'll be the end of it all. To me, this atheist belief is like saying, there is no future life to apply your incredible college learning and experience to, because there is no after college existence, just like there was no before college existence. When you graduate from your college life, after you've received your diploma and then shouted and tossed your cap up high into the air, you simply walk into a future of educated nothingness. Oops, that's wrong. You don't even walk into it. You simply become dust. And don't forget to think about all the millions of non-existent people who would have loved to have had your college life experience, but weren't lucky enough to have it. Oh, and by the way, there are the non-existent people who now feel insulted about your college experience. Remember, you and those lucky enough to have attended college or who are now attending college, if you and they don't make the very best of it, you'll be callously insulting those non-existent potential college students who don't exist and didn't get to attend college. This, to me, my friends, is truly an atheist delusion. Recently, I was impressed even more on this subject of there's nothing before life and nothing after life, belief that atheists hold on to, when I read an essay written by a woman whose name is May Wang. She is a Harvard graduate as well as a reporting fellow at Harvard Art Museum, Dumbarton Oaks in Washington, D.C. May titled her essay, "If We All End Up Dying, What's the Purpose of Living?" The following excerpts from that essay is what I'm going to read to you. They pretty much sum up not only her view as an atheist, but the view of almost every atheist I know, including Richard, on the question of what's the purpose of life if there's nothing after death. And I quote, I may be accused of not answering the question in the title, if we all end up dying, then what is the purpose of living, head on, and that's fine. So you are a part of the everything of life, which will continue on infinitely after the self dies, she says. But how does that translate to finding meaning in individual life? To that I say, if you truly understand and believe in the idea of oneness, then the question answers itself. There is no purpose of living. Living itself is the purpose. You, yourself, contributes to life. And call me crazy, but I find happiness and satisfaction in that. End of her first quote. May leads up to her conclusion that life or living itself is for her the only purpose of existence and not continual living. She says, and I quote, "This is such a great question because it is the most intensely personal question you could ever ask someone. A person's answer to this question will immediately reveal a number of things: his or her religion, his or her thoughts about the present world and the future, and this strange little thing we call spirituality, or as I like to define it, a personal belief and approach to living that reconciles the tricky concepts of life, death, and subjective experience. I used to associate," she says, "the word spirituality exclusively with New Age hippies who did tons of yoga and believed in healing crystals and astrology, but I also used to be a staunch anti-theist and Richard Dawkins worshiper who handed out postcards about not believing in God during college." She's talking about herself doing that. "Over the past year or two, my views on life, death, religion, and whatnot," she says, "have evolved significantly, and I finally discovered my own personal spirituality, for lack of a better word, which continues to help me live my life in a way that makes me happy. Around November of last year," she says, "I began having trouble sleeping because I couldn't stop myself from thinking about death. Even if I did fall asleep, I'd often wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat because my mind would inevitably wander to the certainty of death and trying to imagine the subjective experience of death, which of course was a futile exercise. The unknown, unexperienced scared the crap out of me," she said, "and that fact that it was going to happen whether I liked it or not filled me with despair. Each night this incredible fear would engulf me as I imagined that never-ending darkness edging closer and closer, that nothingness, until it eventually swallowed me whole, alone, helpless, and flailing. And then the next night it would happen again, no matter how hard I tried to push the thought out of my mind. Rinse and repeat. This period lasted for about 3 months. I have no idea what triggered it. It may have had something to do with the fact that I was turning 25 soon. As a 25-year-old, I was officially not so young adult anymore who needed to start thinking about the rest of her life. And it could have had something to do with the fact that I had newly moved to Hong Kong, didn't love it, didn't know what my next step was, and was consumed by a constant uncertainty that unsettled me in general. Either way, it was terrifying and awful, but also necessary to trigger the intensely rewarding journey of personal discovery that followed. This is starting to sound really cheesy, I know, but stay with me here," she says. "On a trip to Seattle in early 2014, I purchased The Little Book of Atheist Spirituality by Andre Comte, Sponville, at the Left Bank bookstore next to Pike Place Market. The title intrigued me because I had been used to reading very strongly opinionated atheist texts like The God Delusion by Dawkins and God Is Not Great by Hitchens, and this seemed like an interesting, albeit slightly unconventional take on the subject of atheism. However, before moving to Hong Kong, I'd only been able to get through the first 2 chapters, Can We Do Without Religion and Does God Exist?, which were pretty much similar, though arguably more eloquent, rehashes of subject matter I had encountered before in The God Delusion, etc. During the period of existential crisis, however, I decided to crack the book open again and take a shot at the 3rd chapter, Can There Be an Atheist Spirituality? Trust me, I am not exaggerating when I tell you that this chapter of this book changed my life," she says. "Before reading the book, I had already begun juggling some ideas in my head about the meaning of life and what happens to subjective experience, individual subjective self-experience of the self after death. I knew I did not believe in God in the sense that I did not believe in the very specific idea of an anthropomorphic, all-knowing being who resides in the sky, in other words, the sky God Richard speaks of, and has control over every movement and actions of life on earth. However, I was beginning to open myself up to the idea of many different kinds of truths and to really think about these as possibilities rather than focus all my energies on the denial of God's existence because I believed it improbable. My focus shifted from one-track denial of a certain belief to the exploration of many beliefs in which maybe I could find a home. May is one of the millions of people who are searching for the truth regarding the big questions of life and knows not where to find it. Continuing about May, I was searching for something to sustain me and help me find meaning in life despite knowing that human death was certain. Why is this searching or longing showing up again? Why the feeling of a hole, a gap that May felt she needed to fill? It even seems to be ubiquitous for all of humanity, does it not? Continuing, the idea of reincarnation has always fascinated me, May said. Not necessarily the idea of a person dying and then becoming a frog or another animal in the next life per se, but the idea of the cyclical of life contained within itself. This has been explored by many philosophers, poets, village prophets alike, and something in it has always rung true to me. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. There are so many observable cycles here on earth, and it didn't seem entirely impossible that the end of life itself could coincide entirely with the beginning. Perhaps I thought life is contained entirely in itself. Self? Where is that coming from? We live the same life over and over again infinitely, and perhaps there is no time, since linear time is a human construct, so though we feel we are living life linearly from beginning to end, that is our only subjective experience, and in reality we are just going from point A to point B, which is also point A, and going around and around, becoming and being at all points of our life at once. Is that confusing? Yeah. But that idea is also highly unsatisfying, she says. It makes life seem like a trap that we can't get out of. It also places such a huge emphasis on individual life, making each person one unit of life, only mattering to oneself, just to oneself, really. Why, as humans then, do we seek camaraderie, identity with people, feel love, wander the world, breathe the air, and reap so much satisfaction from being with others and among the world? It didn't make sense. In other words, why the strong bonds of family, as an example? And then I read Comte Sponville. Comte Sponville speaks of a feeling of oneness of or with the universe as the pinnacle or core of atheist spirituality. This spirituality does not need God or some other deity in the middle of it. The universe and the present, he says, is enough. In fact, it's all there is. Let me insert here my definition of spirituality and personality. Spirituality is our ability to relate to God, and our personality is our ability to relate to other people. So a lot of folks out there have a hard time relating to God, so their spirituality is quite small. But there are fantastic personalities out there that really relate to people in generous and wonderful ways, and so they have a great personality. May continues, the universe is all we know. It contains us. We operate in it, and we interact with it every day. It is real to us so far as our subjective experience dictates. And he, Comte Sponville, gives an example of this feeling of oneness, connectedness in other words, which he terms the oceanic feeling. Walking in the woods with friends on a cool summer evening, stopping to gaze up at the stars and feeling overwhelmed by the beauty in the night sky, suddenly feeling like more than yourself, that the wind in your hair, the chirping of night birds, your friend's cool arm in your arms, is sublime and true and all that matters. His descriptions rang so true to me because I've definitely felt like that before, many, many times. And I think many of you have as well. Remember that super cheesy scene in The Perks of Being a Wallflower? When Charlie and his friends raced through the night in a convertible and declared that in that moment they felt infinite. Moments like those, lucid moments of recognition that you are alive and part of this infinite world. Infinite? Really? Don't scientists say that this world is coming to an end quicker than we can think, and that our bodies are all going to have a worm fest? Where will this feeling of infinite come from then? It's as simple and as obvious as that, she says, and according to Comte Sponville, it is exactly this oneness of, or with, the universe that makes life worth living, because it is complete, incredible, everything. We must accept it because we are part of it, and that very fact is marvelous and incredible. This is probably the trickiest part to wrap your head around, so here's a wonderful, eloquent excerpt from Comte Sponville that perfectly expresses this idea in a much better way than I can quote. Love of fate, loving what is, not because it is good, but because it is the set of all things that occur, the universe really, and because nothing else exists. This is a tragic wisdom, the Dionysiac affirmation of the universe as it is, with no possibility of subtraction, exception, or choice. It means participating in the innocence of becoming, the eternal yes of being, which is the self-affirmation of all, not what should be, but what is, neither hope nor regret. It is the only path. There is no way out except acceptance. We must say yes to all that is and to all that occurs, but it is the yes of acceptance. All is true, all is real, not the yes of approval, all is well. It is the yes of wisdom, not of religion, or more accurately, it is not a word, and neither wisdom nor religion exist. All that exists is the eternal necessity of becoming, which is true being. In other words, life is everything, and I, my subjective self, am irresistibly a part of that everything of life. So what part of you, after you have died and your body has become a worm banquet of dust, is still part of the universe you're calling life? What part of you? Is it just the dust? Or is it all the memories that others will continue having of you, held in their minds while they're still living? If not that, then what is it? What is this everything you're speaking of? Okay. Gandhi once said, all life is one. He might have been using the phrase to encourage people of all castes and colors to come together and end discrimination, but I subscribe to this phrase as a belief, and I subscribe to it literally. As humans, our primary instinct and goal is to stay alive ourselves and help each other stay alive. This is still her talking. To stay alive too. It may be for atheists, but for theists, it's to live in such a way so that we can return to our Creator and become one with Him. Become one with Him. Christ said He is one with the Father. Of course, we want to live as long as we possibly can, but that's not our primary goal in life. She continues, we are naturally inclined to sustain life. So what if all life is one? We are only identified as individuals because we have different bodies which carry different subjective experiences of life. What about our individual thoughts and desires, May? Are these subjective experiences our individuality, our individual selves? But each individual is living life itself, she says. Perhaps as individuals we are just all just vehicles, really. She continues, vehicles living out life because life itself demands to be lived. A vehicle can grow old physically and wither and die, but after death of an individual vehicle, life itself continues anew and in others who are still living. So it is life itself continuing on forever in those still alive and not in the man that goes on. It's a little confusing. So if I'm sure I'm glad May put this if in here, I'll due to all her guessing. She says, so if all life is one what? One big pile of memories, thoughts, ideas, guesses, forever getting bigger and bigger like Google search engine? What? And you, or my experiences, are and will become a part of that one, or oneness of experience and knowledge. Is that what she's talking about? You are that one, she says, or oneness. Then why would you, my living self, care about the death of an individual self, which is merely a vehicle? Are you talking about the physical shell that carries around the mind or spirit being, our true self, the conscious self, with its consciousness and all that makes a person, an individual self who is self-aware? What are you talking about, May? She continues, you are a part of the universe, of life. I certainly am, and life will continue, and so will you. When you say you, do you mean all my contributed memories that are in the minds of those still living life, even though I am no longer alive? Or do you mean my conscious self, my spirit self? What are you talking about, May? She continues, what a beautiful thought. Spirituality happens when the self is transcended and the all of the universe, this big pile of memories and memory making that exists in the minds of all those still living, or just the physical parts of the universe, is accepted, she says, as articulated by Comte Sponville. He says, we are separated from the all only by thought, only by ourselves. When the ego is relinquished, he says, or transcended, given up and accepted, when thought ceases, the all remains. What? I thought that the all was our thoughts, our memory, making while living, and the accumulation of memories in the big pile of memories called life out there in the universe. Now you're saying, though, itself is to cease for the all to remain. Let me repeat that. Now you're saying that the thought that itself is to cease for the all to remain. Come on, man, he continues. I may have lost you already, May says, and you may be thinking, what a load of bollock. A British vulgar slang word, I suppose. What a cop-out, what desperate grasping at straws to avoid confronting the certainty of death, and that your loved ones will all die. You're no better than those religious fanatics. You're reading my mind, May. I've had all of these thoughts, trust me. I've turned this subject around in my head so many times, yet somehow the concept rings so true to me. The eternal yes of being, because being is all we have and is all there is. Or so you believe. It's only your opinion, May. This eternal yes of being we call life, is not God. It's not Buddha. It's not heaven and prancing around on fluffy white clouds and 72 virgins of death. It's just as simple as letting go of the rigid idea of the self, she says, and taking joy in being a part of life and the universe. And now, this is me, at death there will be no more taking joy in being part of life. I have never agreed, she said, with the idea that atheism is the lack of belief. I prefer to think that as an atheist, I am a healthy skeptic. I gather information, I question everything, and I evaluate all options before I choose to believe in something, she says. Choose to believe. Richard's the exact opposite. Now, that is possibly the first thing I have ever agreed with May on what she said so far. We do, in fact, choose to believe, May. May continues. My atheism is the lack of belief in the conventional tenets of organized religion, most of which worship a single deity and contain elaborate, comprehensive theorems about the origin of life. Yet it does not mean that I will not and do not believe in anything, and that I cannot develop my own spirituality and understanding of life. May's a great candidate for placing her atheism on Richard's probability scale. I don't think it would land at 7 or even 6. May continues. What is spirituality? Like I said earlier, spirituality is our relatability to God, and personality is our relatability to people. But for May and other atheists like her, spirituality is something quite different. She quotes Andre's definition of what spirituality is. Quoting Andre Comte Sponville once again, our finite relationship to infinity or immensity, our temporal experience of eternity, our relative access to the absolute. Got it? Sounds like a wordy way of saying that what I said spirituality was. Just kidding. Okay. Of course, that doesn't answer the question, May says. What happens to subjective experience? All our thoughts and memories stored in the mind, etc., is what she's talking about. What happens to it after we die? If it's not going to heaven or reincarnation? Because there is still no getting around the idea that at least the particular subjective experience you are living now is tied to the self and the individual. You got that right, May. All that we are and have been and all that we have done and are going to do is certainly tied to the self, our spirit self indeed. And that self will live on forever. And then we are resurrected with our bodies. But she continues, but even that is a tricky subject that can be written and postulated endlessly about. I highly recommend a Wait But Why article on what makes you you that sheds more light or adds more confusion to, depending on which way you see it, the subject. And I have to admit, she says, I still do not know and don't know if I ever will know the answer. Yet that very question, and this is me, what makes you you, May? Okay. Yet that very question does not seem to matter so much when the importance of the self and subjective experiences ceases to be everything. But even that is a tricky subject, she says, that can be written and postulated endlessly about. I highly recommend a Wait But Wait article on what makes you you. Okay, I'm going to stop that there. That's the end of May's essay. That is just one side of the atheistic side of the two sides debate regarding the value of life or the sanctity of life and its purpose, the purpose of life or lack of purpose, and ultimately what atheists believe life really is. That's what I've just gone through this entirety of this video. So I'm going to stop here, and the next video is going to be the other side of the coin, the other side of the debate, the theist view of the purpose of life. And then you can measure which one makes more sense to you. So I don't have anything more to say. I think I said it's gone a long one, but I think I have shared with you what the atheists believe or don't believe or have no faith for. And I hope that this next video will clearly explain what my point of view, my perspective is on the purpose of life and the sanctity of life and why it has sanctity and value. So, comments, questions, share them. I'll do my best to get to them as quickly as possible. But until next time, I want to wish you continued success. Goodbye.